Well, once again, everybody is speculating about the real estate industry and specifically the commercial real estate segment because nobody wants to go back to offices. According to Bloomberg, about 50% of office space in use today is empty. And that's potentially a new normal, but it creates issues when $92 billion of non-bank, specifically office debt, matures this year, which needs refinancing at potentially substantially lower prices. Some brokerages are estimating that there will be 330 million square feet of excess office space by the end of the decade. And just to picture what a million square feet feels like, think about an average mall being around 1 million square feet. Now, picture 330 of those and fill them with cubicles. That's how much empty office space you might have. That's a lot. So it's leading a lot of people to believe that, we could probably just rebuild those office spaces into condos, right? I mean, why not just take the condos or the office spaces and turn them into condos? You know, we need more housing, so why not solve the housing problem by doing just that? Solve the housing problem at the same time as dealing with all these vacant office spaces. And the New York Times has done a phenomenal piece on this. The New York Times analyzed just this, and they found that there are certain shapes of buildings that are really conducive to doing this. Now, they're all from a particular era, which is great. They have these shapes that look like this. They have H shapes, O shapes, C shapes, U shapes, I shapes, and L shapes. These buildings are really conducive to being turned into office spaces because they're close to windows and they have a lot of availability of space. So it's easy to turn these buildings into condos or studios. Look, for example, if you have a slender, skinny building. Look at this, for example. Let's say this was a typical small office building where maybe it was a 10-story building and you basically had little offices off the left and right. You had maybe a receptionist window and then an office, and then you had shared bathrooms. These kind of buildings are very typical for the late 1920s, sort of the pre-war era office building, where you had little suites, as you could see here. And these suites are perfect for turning into, guess what? Homes. 2-bedroom homes, 1-bedroom homes, fantastic. As you can see here, looks functional, right? You created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 different units that people could live in out of what used to be offices. That's fantastic. Unfortunately, something happened that makes these sorts of conversions, which look pretty nice and usable for Manhattan, a lot less functional for today. And that's unfortunately because we changed the architecture of our buildings substantially. Instead of having these older 1920s style buildings where you had smaller windows that could actually operate and open, and they weren't that wide to where a lot of space was close to windows, which could easily then be converted into condos, what did you end up getting after the war? Well, you ended up getting office buildings that ended up looking a lot wider. See, here's your typical 1929 building. That's slim building, I should say, that makes it very easy to on one side put a condo and then on the other side put a condo and then you have a hallway in between. Easy, right? This is your typical 1929 building. Well, what unfortunately happened after that? 1959 post-war, damn, the thing got a whole lot boxier. And all of a sudden it's really difficult to put a condo in the middle of the property because now it has no window space at all. But the problem just got worse. In 1974, the buildings got even wider. You can still see that same footprint for a condo over here in the middle of nowhere. No window space. Not great. In 1974, another example here, Willis Tower in Chicago. Here's a 1983 example in Houston, same problem. Here's a 2020 example from the 50 Hudson Yards property, even worse of a problem. Now, this is typically how these are generally laid out. You have a crap ton of office space and cubicles. You have an open workspace. That's what everybody wanted before the pandemic. Everybody wanted a bigger trading floor, a bigger co-working area. People didn't want small offices anymore. So what came to office, everybody's like, look, we got AC, we don't have to be close to windows. We got fluorescent light bulbs, we don't have to be close to windows. Heck, now we got LEDs. Let's just have a massive open workspace and everybody can work together, all happy. Well, that's wonderful. And that's the trend we went on for like 60 years. Then COVID hit, and what happened? Yeah, we just don't like offices at all. So now you're stuck with these open floor plan buildings where you really have to do a lot of rejiggering to make these office buildings functional. And it's very difficult. Now, it's possible to do it. The New York Times shows an example of how it was possibly done. Here's an example where you have the original floor plan followed by a potential after floor plan where you create a courtyard in the middle to create more light. But unfortunately, that courtyard is just people looking out other people's windows. You don't really have a view of anything, but you do get some natural light. You basically have to hollow out the center of the building if you can do that structurally. And now you can create condos, but you end up creating some funk. Like, look at this. Look at these weird zigzag walls that you have to create because of the way the existing plumbing, electrical systems, and most importantly, the structural beams end up sitting. So you end up having structural members in the middle of bedrooms, you end up having funky floor plans, and it makes it really difficult to convert these old office buildings into something functional. And so the New York Times makes the argument that many, unfortunately, of these office buildings are potentially just going to have to be demolished. Again, you've got a lack of windows in many of these, a lack of operable windows. You know when you see like floor to ceiling glass skyscrapers? Well, guess what happens with those suckers? You can't open the damn windows. And you can't open the window, what do you not have? A fire escape. So you don't have a functional opportunity to turn it into condos anyway, because you don't have 2 points of entry and exit. It's a problem. Deep interiors, these open office floor plans, when people don't want offices anymore, basically means when it comes to offices, you've got a lot of toxic assets. Now, there are a lot of fears that the toxic assets in the office space is going to end up leading to contagion. We'll end up seeing the residential and commercial sectors, that is multifamily, single family, retail, industrial, and all real estate values compress. And that'll ultimately be for speculation in a separate video. But what we can say is when it comes to offices, converting offices is going to be a whole lot harder than it seems. Yeah, can we convert 1920s buildings? Absolutely. Can we easily convert some of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s buildings? Not so fast. So we're going to have some massive problems. And so in my opinion, this idea that no problem, empty offices, just convert them to housing. Easier said than done. And if anybody's ever gone through permitting, you know that office space doesn't require the same standards that residential space requires. In fact, a lot of office space in many states don't require fire sprinklers, but residential space does. Residential space also often requires more intense seismic requirements because people might be asleep when disaster could strike, whether it's fire or earthquake or otherwise. That leads to more intense engineering standards, which some buildings just won't satisfy. And so that creates a massive problem for the office real estate space. Probably the last place I'd want to be right now is owning office buildings. And the idea that companies with money can just go in and start converting office buildings, probably highly unrealistic. What is very realistic, though, is you gaining the lead by checking out the programs on Building Your Wealth link down below. We've got a massive coupon expiration today on 4/20 at the end of the day at 11:59. We are going to be moving to a completely different structure where there won't be a low-cost entry anymore. So if you're looking for a low-cost way to get lifetime access to those live streams, make sure you join today because it's going to be getting a lot more expensive and the barrier to entry is getting a lot larger. So check out those programs, link down below. And when it comes to office spaces, the idea that we could easily convert these, probably relatively unrealistic. Despite everybody hoping for more housing, the housing shortage will probably continue for a long time. until governments finally wake up and make it easier for developers to build more homes faster and still at quality standards. But that might be too much of a feat to accomplish. So in the meantime, housing shortage likely to continue while office tanks.